Welcome to the From Foster to Blank podcast, where we're highlighting former foster youth who have discovered their passion in life and creating their own purpose by redefining what success means to them. It's almost like a Where Are They Now podcast. Within every single story, we will see different people highlight what inspired them to change the direction of their life and how they achieve their own goals by redefining what success is. The best part is everyone is going to have a different definition of what success is, and we get to learn from them. The other neat part is that every single one of these people are going to highlight what they do, and they're going to give advice on how they got there. This is an educational podcast for people that are like you and me, foster care kids, but we're going to see it from a different lens of positivity. So here we go.
I love this. Is this your daughter?
Yes. Oh, all right. We're back with the From Foster to Blank podcast with Harper. She's our guest speaker with Joan today. I'm very excited to have Joan on our podcast and hear more about her. So this is Harper Joy. This is my daughter. And so I'm going to have Joan take it away. What do you do, Joan?
I am a volunteer court-appointed special advocate, sometimes referred to as CASA. I advocate for children that are in foster care because I did not have a CASA advocate when I was in foster care. And what CASAs do is we are appointed by the judge to represent a child or a sibling group of children that are in conservatorship of the state.
Okay.
And we're appointed by the judge, and we look into anything going on with the child or the family as sort of a fact finder. The goal is to be able to give the judge the most detail and information about the child's needs and wishes so they can have a really clear picture when ruling on decisions or requests from the Department of Child Protective Services. And we are completely independent of CPS, by the way. I just want to make that clear. Some folks and parents don't seem to know that we're different. We act independently, and we only represent those kiddos.
Okay, so I have a question about this because I didn't have a CASA either. Neither did my siblings. But from what I'm gathering from you, you are the person who goes on behalf of the child, not the parents, not, the caseworkers, but the child. So if the child is at a certain age that you go before, or is it all ages? Tell me a little bit about how specifically you get selected. Like, is it under the age of 18, under the age of 12? Like, I'm not familiar with the CASA.
That's a great question. Okay, so I was a teenager when I entered foster care and had never heard this term either. And now, fast forward 40 years later, I've been serving as a CASA volunteer advocate for 5 years. When I went into the program, I did a little bit preliminary investigation, reached out to my local program, hey, what's this about? What would I be doing? Do I need to have a specific background? And they gave me an overview, said I didn't have to have a specific background, and told me that I could represent any age range that I was interested in. And for me, teenagers are where my heart is because I was, that age range when I was in care. And I feel like oftentimes we just hear about kids that go into care, maybe they're really young or they're babies or they're toddlers, and they get a lot of attention. A lot of people have big hearts for the little kids. But then the teenagers, I think, often get overlooked. And so my heart is that, every child in foster care would have a volunteer advocate walk beside them. I mainly ask for cases with teenagers. The CASA advocate, each is different. Each can ask, for a different case or whatever population they want to serve. I've represented children as young as, I want to say, maybe 3 or 4.
Oh, wow.
And then in between, but mostly preteen and teens, and even children in extended care, going into college.
So I think a misconception, because we've always heard the language in the courtroom where it's like over 12, you can have a say. But what I'm really hearing is, yes, over 12, a lot of young little adults can have a say in what they would like, but maybe they're not comfortable sharing in a courtroom. Maybe they're not comfortable sharing what they want in front of their family. So you get to go on behalf of them and say, look, I looked into this, I dug into this information, I've sat with this child or children, and this is what would be best for them. So you're not just looking at the parent power play or the CPS power play that could happen, and that does happen with cases, but you're looking at really what is best for the child, and maybe the child's not even vocalizing that need because maybe they're not comfortable. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
So the CASA, the court appointed special advocate, or another term in some jurisdictions is guardian ad litem.
Mm.
Um, Both the CASA Gale model is based on a national Gale or CASA and Gale association. That model was developed in Seattle about 40 years ago. And it spread to most states across the country. So right now, 49 states and the District of Columbia have this program available. Now, answering your comment, each jurisdiction is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you mentioned, 12, that kind of stuck in my mind too. I'd recalled participating in a family member's child custody hearing. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time in Texas, the judge might say, hey, if the child's over 12, they can have a say. Now, in Child Protective Services, in these type of child family cases, it's going to differ. And some of the CASA model is based on, like, quote unquote, being the voice of a child. I don't mind that term, but there are many youth that have been in care or are in care. They don't like that term. They don't want somebody to say that they're the voice for them.
Right,
I
right.
believe that we can be a voice for the child that's very young and can't, like, address the judge, swear an oath and testify. In that respect, yeah, I'm voicing the child's concerns and needs and wishes and the things that I see as concerns and recommendations. But for the older children, I feel like I'm more the voice to empower them. Like, if I can
Mm-hmm.
empower them to advocate on their behalf, different jurisdictions are going to allow children to come to court for particular hearings while their parents are going through this whole process. Normally, those children in my jurisdiction would be like in a children's room behind the courtroom, where they don't have access to all the parties that are involved, and the judge has stopped the proceedings before, even in the middle of my testimony. And I've said, Your Honor, child X is in the children's room and would really like to speak with you.
Mm.
And this has been notable for many of the teenagers that I've served. They
Yeah.
wanted to, like, specifically talk to the judge and say, hey, Your Honor, this is what's going on. And in a way, it puts the exclamation point on the points that I just testified to the court about.
Mm.
Because they're also there, and then the judge can see them face to face and hear that. So I think, again, the point is, each jurisdiction, every courtroom can be a little different, but
Yeah.
regardless of the age, I believe that from the CASA Gale model, every child's voice should be heard, and we have a duty to listen to that child and
Yeah.
then make sound recommendations, objective recommendations to the court.
Absolutely. And I know for a lot of foster youth, they have felt that there's a statement of we don't like to hear it, but it's the statement of I know what's best for you, or this would be
Right.
really good for you. And it's because different caseworkers or parents or CASAs have in the past come and said this will be really good for you, or this is our recommendation, but their voice was not able to be heard. And you're saying no, 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 like our job is to empower their voice, and if they want to speak, it's my job to come to the court and say, okay, here's all the rundown stuff, but this individual would actually likes a moment with you to speak with you. And that's
Yes.
empowering them to say, okay, I've given them the rundown. If I missed anything, you are able to go in and talk about this, but really just, we've set the groundwork, but this is your voice, your time, your moment. Let me know if I missed anything. And then let me empower you to speak up, because that's the whole goal of a CASA. I love that so much. Now
There
you're
there
just,
are some
go ahead.
circumstances. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're
If
good.
I can, okay. So there's a number of parties that are involved in these cases. For people that are listening to your podcast that are not familiar with the foster care system, in the state of Texas, which is where I'm at, we would have an attorney represent the mom, and then a separate attorney represent the dad, or a number of dads if there's a number of children on the case that have different dads. There would be the attorney that represents the department, the CPS department, and then there would be an attorney that represents the child ad litem. And then if there's a CASA available and a CASA is on the case, there's a CASA as well. All these parties would be the folks that would report to the judge during each hearing. Now,
Mm.
here's where the difference is. Yes, I believe in empowering the youth. Best interest is always important coming from an objective perspective where the CASA advocate has a lot of time on their hands to really dig in and investigate the case and talk to all the parties involved. So I at times, kind of not agree with the attorney and with the department. The child's attorney always has to do what the child wants. The
Mhm.
CASA has to do what is in the best interest of the child. The department does what the department wants. The parents' attorneys do what the parents want. So there's
Okay.
all these competing factors. It's nice when we're all on the same sheet of music and the children agree that, yep, y'all are working for me. Thank you. Everything's going smooth.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
Um, but I try to ensure that the judge clearly understands this is my objective opinion. Here's what the child wants.
Right.
Sometimes it's a little different because sometimes the children want to go back to an unsafe environment because that's all they
Right.
ever knew.
Right.
And that's the toughest thing is that I may have to, tell my youth that I know you want to go home right now, but we need these things to happen. Mom or dad need to complete a drug treatment
Right.
program, or we need to get the unsafe people out of the house, those things. And
Right.
sometimes children are just, I want to go home, I want to go home. And that's
Right.
really tough. But I work with that youth and make sure they're clearly communicating those needs
Right.
and never deny them access to the judge.
Right. And that's the hardest part is sometimes it's not even like being the bad guy, but it's being the person who's on the understanding of what's best for that child or teenager. It's like you said, they want to go home and they're not ready to go home yet because maybe the parents
Exactly.
aren't doing what they need to do. And you're just like, I understand that, but this is the why we can't do that right now. And that's heartbreaking to be the person to be the bearer of bad news. But it also is something where you're not doing it in that moment. Sometimes there is that request in the moment, but it's not always in that moment. Like you're trying to prepare them to say like, hey, right now is not a time. You can absolutely ask the judge, but here's the things that the reason why, they're going to most likely
Yeah.
deny it. So you can prepare that child as well, because it's, there's not a lot of honesty sometimes that the child has heard. So I love what CASAs get to do, but I know it's hard. So you're also an author though, is that right?
Yes. Yes, I recently, I've been doing this CASA advocacy for 5 years. I had what I term a misplaced childhood. I had a very traumatic childhood with various forms of abuse and neglect, a stint in foster care, being returned home, being separated from my brother, never seeing him again, and then basically being put right back into an abusive environment where I, ended up running away a number of times. But ultimately, I joined the military, spent 20 years in the military, and finally settled in Texas before I even knew what my purpose was in going back and serving children. So
Yeah.
the authorship came from just a casual conversation with my CEO here in San Antonio. She was new to the job, and we were just getting familiarized with some legislative agenda that we were going to be advocating for at the state level. And she kind of shared some of her experiences with me and where she came from. And I kind of felt vulnerable at that moment. And I thought, well, she asked me, why do I do this? And so I was like, it's not much different than, what you went through. I was in foster care and, I have this past, and I didn't speak about it much through my young adulthood or even the first 12 years of my marriage. Um, but I'd been doing other things along the way. And so this conversation with my CEO led me to be very retrospective. And then I don't know, I guess it was the next path. I felt compelled to write this journey because there is no other story like this about a child who had been in this situation, had been in care, had no advocate, and then later in life discovers the purpose of serving children in care as that advocate. So I feel like it's my God-given mission, my purpose in life
Yeah.
to be a CASA advocate because I never had one. And I felt compelled to tell the story so that I could recruit and retain advocates so that at some point, my wish is that every single child in foster care, right now, about 400,000 of them all have an advocate to walk beside them so they don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
What I went through earlier in my life, like I would say I was swimming in peanut butter. If you can imagine that vision, how difficult it would be to, be lopping about this
Yeah.
mushy substance. So now what I do, and I state this in the book too, is if you see a child swimming in peanut butter, I mean, they're struggling. Why not be their jelly? Why not like be with them and be in it together and guide them through this process? I feel
Yeah.
like we all can do this. You don't have to have a special background. You don't have to have a background like mine or, like have
Right.
been in foster care. You just have to care and be
Yeah.
committed.
I love that analogy of peanut butter because it feels like that. It feels like
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's sticky and it smells and it's not like and not like people don't realize that when you leave peanut butter out for a while, it smells. Like
It's
it's not a good
it's not easy.
smell.
And
No,
I don't mean to make light of what these children are going through.
no.
Because there's not enough CASA advocates or Gale advocates right now to represent every child in care. Generally, we're assigned to the most difficult cases,
Yeah.
so we deal with some pretty trying situations. And in 5 years, I've served 24 kids.
Mm.
I'm currently working on two cases right now involving 8 children, and I'm still trying to make some of those connections. These are relatively new cases to me. The youngest child just turned 4, and the oldest child just turned 19. Um, but I want them to know that I'm serious about this and that I will do everything I can to advocate for their educational needs, if it means special accommodations through IDEA or 504 services in school,
Yeah.
tutoring, grade placement exams, maybe a charter school that they want or a familiar school, anything in that area, and then even other therapeutic services or medical services if they need speech or occupational physical therapy and somebody's not getting on top of this. Maybe if they're in therapy but they're not receiving the specific trauma-based therapy or play therapy or even family therapy with a parent, I'll advocate for those services too, because it just seems that when you're a CASA and you work 1, 2 cases, maybe a few more, you dedicate the time specifically to those children. Caseworkers, we know this across the board, they're overworked, probably underpaid, overburdened with way too many cases. They don't have the time to get to know the families and the children the way we do. So I just pour into it. And I've served with a number of awesome caseworkers who cared just as deeply about the children as I did. But as soon as I brought them an issue to their attention, whatever it was that I was advocating for, education, therapy, medical services, or the like, they would jump on it, and then we would get it addressed. And then, of course, sibling visits and family visits and reunifications, if that's possible. You just if you got a good family that you're working with, and these children or the family is being harmed for being in care, you want to advocate to get permanency as fast as possible. So
Yeah.
I love this process.
So you were saying that there is not enough CASAs out there. So you're usually given to the worst case scenario or worst situation when it comes to cases. How can someone get involved with being a CASA?
Well, like I said, 49 states in the District of Columbia, I think it's North Dakota that doesn't have a program, can go to the National CASA Gale Association website and research their state and find the program near them to inquire about the services and the options available for them. In my book, because we're going back to this because you mentioned the author, so I've got my website in the dialogue box there on this call, www.joanulsher.com, JOANULSHER.com. At my website, I have the link to the National CASA Gale Association, as well as a link to my local program. All the proceeds of my book are going to benefit CASA. I'm not trying to earn a profit or a living as an author. I retired from the military. I think God's met my needs, and this is what I do to give back because I didn't have this person available to me.
Mm.
So by going to my website, you can find the links there. Reach out to your local program and contact them about what the requirements are. And the unique thing about my book too is, like I said before, nobody done this lens. Nobody had I was the child in care. I didn't have an advocate. And now I'm an advocate in doing this. When I walk through the story of my life, it's tough. It's a hard journey, that trauma in the past, but you'll see, kind of the overcoming that and transforming my life into becoming a CASA. But I walk through the CASA process, how I heard of the program, how I found it, what it was like to apply, what I had to go through as far as scrutiny, whether it was a background check or interview or whatever. I kind of walk through that process. And then I describe a lot of the things that stuck with me from training, because this is the National CASA Gal organization, the association provides a curriculum for all the states to follow and use as a guide. And so I walk through that process, and then after training and getting sworn in, I talk about, how I struggled with how I was going to select my first case, and then how I felt like it was the right case for me, because you don't necessarily have to just be assigned something you don't want to do. You can kind of get a read ahead and go, yeah, these are the kids I want to work with. This is the case for me. And then I walk through an experience and journey with the children that I serve, and kind of a little bit on them, but paying heed to their confidentiality. So there's more self-disclosure in the my background and my story and trauma, but more of the association I have with the children as opposed to the really ugly things that have gone on in their life. But you'll see the kids also transform through that reading as well. So anybody that goes to my website, they can sign up there, contact me, and I'll send an advance excerpt of the book.
Yeah.
It's in editing right now and won't be available until September 19th, 2023 for publication.
That is awesome. So, okay. So if they want more information, they can go to your website, but you were also saying one of the things is just your website. It does have kind of like, here's some things I've learned through this. Or is that just in the book?
That's in the book. Yeah. And the website's fairly new, maybe a month or two now. It's got room to grow. It'll describe what the book includes to give you an idea and a feel for, why I advocate on children and how it's a call to action. I mean, truthfully, I'm just trying to get people informed about CASA. How was I in foster care 40 years ago? And I went 35 years and never even heard of foster Gale. How was that? I mean, did I have blinders on? Did I tune it out? What on earth? I found it 5 years ago, and now I can't shut up about it. I just want to tell everybody. Because if somebody learns about the program, maybe they find it's not for them. But maybe they say, I want to be a foster parent. I want to be a social worker. I want to be a caseworker. I want to be a teacher. I want to be more informed about the process of the children in my community. I want to help them some way. Maybe they just spread the message. I think everybody has a place when it comes to advocating for children in care. It's just
absolutely
what works for you.
Yeah. And there's different levels. And I like that you bring that up, because I don't think we remember that sometimes. I think we think it's only foster parent or being, like you said, like having to take all the cases versus you're saying, no, I can read through and select these different ones. So I really thank you for highlighting that, because I don't think a lot of people realize what a CASA is, or that there is this thing called CASA. It's a relatively new thing that I'm also hearing, and I was in the foster system for a while. So can you define, in your own words, what is success?
Okay, success is going to be different for everybody. I think it's pretty relative. Let's just start out with a dictionary definition. I would assume that the dictionary would say that success is meeting an accomplishment, accomplishing a goal. I had probably accomplished many goals in my life and never really felt that I was making success or meeting success until I discovered my own resiliency. So the way I would fashion the definition of success is that success is meeting resiliency, basically being able to overcome things and bounce back and not get bogged down in the things that life continues to throw at you. So although, I graduated high school, I graduated college, I had a successful career in the military, I got married, got stepchildren, I got grandkids, I had a stable career I own a house. Those are all successes in many people's eyes, but in my eyes, I couldn't realize those as success until I understood my resiliency to excel beyond the past, beyond the trauma, beyond the hurts. Once I accepted that my life is not about living in the past, dwelling in the past, or what had happened to me. It's about what I do with that. So success for me is how I use my past to just use it for future good. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to
I guess I
use
want to
the
say, yeah,
past to influence the future for the better, though, not to just influence the future for the same thing. Because I think sometimes we hear that where it's like, oh, use the past, but people there's a country song. It says something about looking at the past in the review mirror versus looking at the past in front of you. So it's more of like you're
beautiful.
using it as a guide, but you're not using it as the full focus of your life. And you're saying like, don't get bogged down by it, but you're beyond your past. So now let's use that in your future. I love that. That's really like that's some deep stuff right there. And it's hard. It is really hard. And then I know you can probably say and contest to the same thing, is that with especially with trauma, there's a lot of the times that we're like, well, because of our parents, I had to go through this situation, and it's not fair that we have to. And 100% agree. But at some point, like you were saying, we have to be able to say, let's move past this because I'm in control of the driver's seat now. But don't let that dictate your future. So if you had to give someone advice, if they were looking at trying to like change where they were at, what would you give them?
I guess changing where they're at, in light of, like, say, circumstances like ours, youth that are maybe transitioning from care, or maybe they're living independently now, or young adults trying to find their way at life. I would say that being in touch with what has happened to you, and understanding that it wasn't your fault, um, is the way to start the process to move forward. For me, finding purpose, sometimes it takes a higher power. It did with me. I needed God to like smack me upside the head with a 2x4 and say, like, okay, I know you thought that the military was your life, but hey, guess what? I have other plans for you.
Mm.
I needed that, but that's not for everybody. And I don't want to espouse a religious circumstance for everybody. But understanding that everybody has a purpose of some shape and form, finding it and moving forward with it and using your past experiences can be very beneficial. But for me, it's almost like saying going from survivor to thriver, victim to survivor. Don't
Ah,
stay bogged down. Um, but truly, for me, it couldn't have been done without a lot of therapy,
yeah,
here and there, and quitting and then doing it again. People in my life that I looked up to as mentors,
yeah.
and then of course my faith. But
Mm.
that exact recipe may not be what everybody needs. It might just be a part of that. Maybe somebody just needs to look up to that one person that's kind of shadowing them right now and trying to give
Mhm.
them an olive branch, and perhaps they're still angry about their situation and want to reject it. Maybe it's time to just say, okay, I'm going to trust this one person, as hard as that is.
Yeah,
And
and
then
I
it's just baby steps.
I think it's normal for us to like be angry. And I think that there's emotions of feeling like, well, I can't be upset or angry about my past, or I can't process this because in reality it's hard to process with our family on what happened. So you're saying, hey, like maybe find someone on the outside to process this with, because it'll help, and find that one person that you can trust. So, when it comes to looking for that one person, what are some things that you looked for to say, like, this is a person that I can trust?
I'm gonna rewind it a bit. So I talk about this in my book. When I was a child, I used to, fantasize that I would live in a better family. I just I had a really hard time, and I used to watch these TV programs, and this is going to date me, but like Brady Bunch and the Waltons, Eight is Enough, Leave It to Beaver, those kind of shows. I used to
Those are great
fantasize that those
jokes, by the
parents,
way.
oh,
Yes.
those parents would be mine one day. And you know, I recognize later in life that that was really, you know, immature, but it was something for me to grasp and have hope for. So rather than being angry and mad and striking out at my family or my parents, I just got down to business and was the best student I could be. And I just kept dreaming, I'm going to have this family someday. And when I got older and realized that's crazy, why was I thinking that? Those are make believe people. Then I just kind of looked for people that were in my life that modeled some of those characteristics that I saw on TV. Whether it was like maybe a neighbor that was kind and bought us ice cream when it was hot in the summer, or made cookies. Maybe it was a teacher that paid a little extra attention to me in class. Maybe it was a college professor even that kind of stepped up to say like, hey, you know, you've been in the military a couple of years, and you know, are you affiliated with these military programs, you know, for financial benefit, credit cards, car insurance, things like that.
Ah,
So yeah, so I just kind of like, I don't even know if they knew they were really mentoring me or not. I just kind of sought them out, saw the characteristics I liked, the qualities that I admired, wished that my parents had had, and did that. And then after retiring in the Army, just chance happening, I heard of a young man across the street that was visiting my neighbors. And the neighbor just said, "Hey, we're having a barbecue this afternoon. Come on over. And oh, by the way, we have there's going to be a young man there that you're not going to know, you know, but he's in foster care and his family really doesn't kind of want him and he doesn't really have anybody." And I was like, "Whoa, what?" And so that was the point when I kind of became transparent with my husband and my neighbors. I went over, I introduced myself to the young man. "Hey, how you doing? You know, how can I help you? I hear, you know, this is your situation." We never talked about the details of his case, but at that moment, I became his mentor. I didn't even realize that was what I was gearing up for. But he
yeah.
kind of looked at me and I looked at him, and he's like, "Well, I need a job." And so, you know, through happenstance, we connected as employee employer for a short time, and then I got continued to get to know him. But I've been mentoring that young man now for 14 years, and he's like a son to me. It was just one of those chance happenings that
Mm,
um, I was looking up to people like that when I was younger, and now this young
yeah.
man and I made a connection, and I was like, wow. And the funny thing is, he was in the foster care system here in San Antonio, in Bexar County, Texas. He didn't even know what a CASA advocate was. So neither of us, when we met, even knew what that term was. We were just
Right.
getting along and mentoring and trying to help him out and make sure he didn't fall without a parachute. And then later through the years, I found out what CASA was and reached out to him and said, "Hey, did you ever hear this program?" And when I described it to him, he's like, "I want to come back. I want to be a child that, you know, can sit on a former foster care advocate panel. And I want to tell youth that like I once was, you know, how
Yeah.
their future can be better." So it's like we, we never know what connection we're going to make.
Right.
For
Right.
me, I'm just so honored that he accepted my wisdom and advice, and that mentorship relationship got established. And you know, so and he calls me his aunt.
Oh,
I'm
I
his
love
auntie.
that.
Yeah,
And
it's an amazing story.
you said you looked for what you wanted in people and you kind of just pieced things together, but then you became that person you wish you had. And
Yeah,
so now you're pouring into a youth and now he's pouring into other youth. And it's just this
yeah.
domino effect of things we didn't get that we get to pass on to other people. And it's such a beautiful domino effect versus a bad one.
Isn't it incredible? Like
I
the
love
same way
it.
you're doing it, and other people you interview, if
Yes.
if we can affect change in one person, just one, that person might affect change in another person too. And yeah, the dominoes start falling. And so
Yeah.
having worked with him and now being an advocate and now having worked with 25 youth, uh, you know, important holidays, whether it's a birthday or Christmas, Easter, whatever, my phone's always blowing up with, you know, 25 times more text messages or calls from the youth that I have served before,
Oh,
because
that's
we have that
beautiful.
connection together. And we want to continue to have the dominoes fall from their lives too, where they can continue to affect positive change in other people. It's just important to love one another, to be
Absolutely.
supportive, to be compassionate, and have that purpose within you, and know that you can have your own family, but if these children can also identify and say, "I want to be like that person too. I want to do this in the future," then wow, you know, we're going to change the world that way. one person at a time.
I love that. And there's something that kind of, I know I hear a lot is when people have done events and only like a handful of people show up. They're always like, oh, I'm so sorry, more people didn't come. And I'm like, everyone who's supposed to hear what we have to say today is here. And that's the reality, is that it just takes one of us to come back and change one person's life. And maybe we don't fill stadiums. Maybe we don't, but maybe someone we reaches stadiums. And that's who we were supposed to pour into so that they could go further than we did. And that's a beautiful thing, is that we're going with our purpose forward on purpose versus just kind of, well, it's not good enough. Because I think sometimes we get stuck in that. We're like, it's just one person, but that one person we help, it means the world to them. I love that. Yeah. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about your book. So what is the book name? You said it was going to release. So if you could say the release date again, and then where people can buy it from.
Okay, so September 19th, 2023 is the actual publication date. Should be available wherever books are sold. For sure, Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. It'll be Amazon ebook as well. An audiobook is being planned for probably the new year, after January 2024. So initially paperback and ebook. The book is titled Misplaced Childhood, A True Story of Resiliency and Child Advocacy. And like I said, this is my personal story. It's my journey from that traumatic past into a life of purpose, transformation by God, but doesn't necessarily have to apply to everybody that way. And then my walk through the eyes of me serving as an advocate and what that experience is like. Not every advocate's experience is going to be the same as mine. It's just, again, it's to inform and give you an idea of what is possible and what is out there. But my true mission, like I said, is to reach folks that are maybe early in their CASA or GAIL advocacy and not sure they want to continue with it. Maybe they don't have, that final motivation that they need, or maybe it's to inform other folks about the urgent call for children to have somebody stand by their side. Over 400,000 children each year in foster care. CASA across the country represented about half of them, a little over half of them this past year. That's like 97,000 advocates, but that's still not enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
but anyway, yeah. So the book will be available in September. But folks, if they don't want to lose the information now, go to my website www.joanalsher.com. Sign up for the release information, and I'll stay in touch. I won't spam anybody. I hate that. I'm just going to reach out to you a couple times just to tell you where you can buy it and where the link is at, make it easy for you. If you have questions, comments, if you want to provide me feedback, I just welcome it. I have a really lengthy recommended reading list for books that I've found helpful as a CASA advocate, and books that I've recommended to some of the youth that I serve in foster care. And I'm always looking for more recommendations, so people can reach out to me and say, hey, this book really helped me or helped one of my kiddos. I want to share. I think that's the important thing, is sharing the information.
And I love that you have a book list, because I think that helps, especially people who are wanting to become a CASA. We need it. We need to know where to start. And sometimes reading is where we start, is to first learn. Okay, so if someone wanted to do what you do, what is some advice that you would give them?
Oh, wow. Not to overthink it. Some folks come into this and they ask me, well, don't I have to have a special background? You have that background. You've been very transparent about it. I don't have that. I can't relate to kids that have been through trauma. I'm like, that's okay. You have to have compassion. You have to be patient. You have to demonstrate some competency in dealing with people, and not becoming argumentative in the process, because the process is meant to be objective and not get emotional during a court hearing. But I would say that reaching out to the local program would give anybody the greatest source of information for how they can continue this journey. I honestly didn't know what to expect. For real, my husband knows me pretty well, and he knew I had been mentoring for some time, and he knew some of my background. But one day he was just walking out of the house, and I said, "Where are you going, honey?" And he says, "Oh, I'm going to this CASA training." And I'm like, why didn't you tell me about that? And he's like, "Oh, He's like, the stuff you've been through in life, you'd probably never pass the interview process. And I was like,
Oh,
oh, challenge accepted. So
yeah.
if somebody feels like they've struggled in life and maybe they still have a few struggles going on, please
Yeah.
don't let that be a barrier. Apply if that's what's in your heart. Call the local program and talk to them. Be transparent, as much as it takes so they understand where you are in your journey.
Yeah.
Uh, and undertake the training. You don't have to have any special background. You don't have to be a psychologist or a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer or anything. We have folks from all walks of life and that do this journey, and we have folks as long as they're over 18. You have to be over age 18 to retirement. We've got elderly folks that come in and they just want to work on little baby cases so they can, go to the hospital and hold the babies that maybe were born addicted to drugs. And these grandmas go in there and hold the babies several times a week, and they feel like that's their calling, and then
Mm,
they report back to the judge on everything else they investigate. For me, I just love talking to teenagers. I
yeah.
love dealing with teens, and I want
I
to
love that.
I want to make a difference for them.
I love that so much because and you said something too that I think is a key is that, you said don't let your trauma hold you back or the fear of opening up as a CASA because there's different places that you could be placed and asked to be placed in. Maybe it is just going to the hospital and holding the babies, or maybe it's something else. Maybe they can find a place that's a little unique and different for where you're at emotionally. So I love that
Yeah.
you shared that. Well, that was the last question, but is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, just to reiterate, like we were just talking about. So, like in my book, I talk about one of my first cases, and like I said, it was a difficult case. Took a lot of hours, took a lot of brain power, a lot of collaboration. But my husband, on the other hand, he works with a lot of little kids, and he's had a lot of happy endings. He some cases we've worked together. So if there's a husband-wife team or spouse team out there that is interested in serving together, you can do this together, and that way you can kind of share your experiences and lean on your partner for some encouragement. My husband just loves the little ones, and it's great when I can hear him in the back office and he's getting off of a hearing, and it's a successful reunion or a good ending, a happy ending. And then the same, with my children. I've met some really wonderful parents that I've felt very strongly about the children going back to the parents and making sure that CPS provides all the services that they can get so that they don't fall through the trap door and the struggles that every community has, whether it's socioeconomic or even race. There's some problems out there in all levels in our city centers, and if I've got a strong family and the children and they need to be reunited, I'm going to be that fiercest advocate in their corner. And I hope there are other folks that can join me as well. And in the same token, um, if the child needs to be protected and the parents need some more services and they're not ready to be reunited, um, we'll put it on pause, and maybe revisit it later. But fortunately, I've had, all sorts of different outcomes, and every case is different. Every advocate is different. Every experience, it's just how much you can dedicate and be flexible to this process, and not just close the door because your husband says you're not going to pass the interview. Challenge.
I
I'm
think
calling
that's the
everybody for
most
a challenge.
important part. You're like challenge accepted.
Yes.
But it's
Yeah.
true. And I think sometimes we do close our hearts off and our ability off because we're scared. But like you said,
Yeah.
you found so much purpose through it and your story. So I love that so much. So we want to just thank you for joining. And in September, your book is going to release, Misplaced Childhood. I am so excited to read it. I'm going to buy
Thank
it.
you.
I'm going to be on the list. We're going to have all of your information in the YouTube description box. So we'll place your website there, your information, so people can reach out to you. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we end?
Yeah, I just want to thank the my local CASA organization, Child Advocate San Antonio, for really believing in me as an advocate, giving me an opportunity to serve the children, and then my CEO and my supervisor for um, believing in me in this book process. And then I recently attended the National CASA Gal Association conference in St. Louis about a week ago, and met hundreds of people that have many of them have lived experiences like ours, and we're
Mm,
all in this together. So let's look at this collectively as, hey, this is what I want to do, or if it's not for me, I'm going to share this. So if everybody can at least join me and join you and just sharing the message of advocacy for these children,
Yes.
that's the important thing in the end.
Yeah. And some people, like you said, are not able to take people in physically or
Right.
able to do this emotionally or mentally, but we all can share and be able to be willing to share. And I think that that's the most important piece of all of
Yes.
it. It's just be willing to share it on social media or just share it with a friend if you hear someone going through it or know someone who's wanting to find something to be like, hey, I heard this thing called CASA. And I think that would be something you'd love. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us. I'm excited just to have this go and for people to learn. But we're going to go ahead and end here, and you guys have a wonderful day.
We want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Foster Greatness. We equip foster youth by connecting communities and empowering individuals on their journey. We provide workforce development, master classes, travel abroad experiences, and individual and community support for foster communities. If you're interested in learning more, please visit fostergreatness.co. Thanks for joining us.